Hello, my name is Pete Wolf and I'm the Executive Director of PABC, the Professional Aviation Board of Certification, and I thank you for giving us the opportunity to introduce you to the activities that we are planning for enhancing aviation safety as our air transport system grows enormously over the next several years, as well as the contributions it will make toward global economic development. The PABC is Professional Aviation Board of Certification, and it is the parent organization that is creating the 3PK, the Professional Pilot Preparedness Knowledge, Training Criteria, and Testing, which we hope will become an industry best practice in the years ahead. We'll also be supporting the operation of the Professional Aviation Workforce Development Foundation. We refer to it in this talk as the Foundation. The intent today is for us to explain to you what each of these elements do and why they're important to the 7 stakeholders of our aviation industry listed just below. PABC is an international, nonprofit, non-governmental organization chartered in the U.S. in 2003, and our mission is to ensure the preparedness of new pilots to enter initial new hire training for our professional workforce through an ISO-accredited knowledge testing system. Our tool is the examination, but it's based on a set of standards that we will be engaged in creating in association with our industry to make sure that the standards meet the current industry needs. The 3PK is managed and operated by PABC, and it supports our global mission by developing and maintaining those stakeholder-defined knowledge criteria for training ab initio cadets who are in the preparatory stage getting ready to enter the profession. And we also conduct knowledge testing for pilots who seek employment in professional service. We're not a placement service. We're assessing their knowledge and their competency and readiness to enter that advanced level of training. Why are we doing this? Well, because ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, and the national authorities, standards and testing, set a minimum floor for aviation safety, not a professional standard, at the entry level of the process. They do set professional standards for those engaged in professional service, but not the preparatory areas or phases. And those standards are inconsistent and generally outdated. Having a license or passing a national authority, a civil aviation authority exam, does not assure that a pilot is prepared to enter professional training. In the past, commercial pilot license and instrument rating requirements were adequate for entry. But the industry has changed over time, and in the last several years it's advanced extremely fast. And the national authorities' standards have not kept pace with those industry changes. As a result, there's a large gap between what the pilots know and what they need to know in order to enter that training. In a 2011 study, the International Civil Aviation Organization found that pilots need basic ATP level, airline transport pilot level knowledge, if they're going to expect to successfully complete an airline's new hire training program. That same report also noted that it's probable that the majority of current airline transport pilot knowledge exams, and these are the ones that are written by the national authorities, those exams fail to validate that a pilot has the necessary knowledge and competencies needed to proceed with indoctrination to an international air operator. So even though they pass the examination, they're still not assured of being ready and prepared enough to successfully complete new hire training. So back to that question about why we're doing it. We're doing it because of those shortfalls in the testing and standards process at the moment, but also because the lack of preparedness that they carry into new hire training degrades the training that result in a costly delay in pilot production and often disrupts route expansion plans because there weren't enough pilots available to fly those routes. And it also leads to operational errors and inefficiencies which are costly. And frequently, this lack of preparedness goes undetected during training and even in the testing and checking process, not just initially, but sometimes throughout the pilot's career, posing a latent and long-term risk to both operational safety and effectiveness. The foundation is going to be described in more detail later, but essentially it is a nonprofit, non-governmental organization operated by PABC, and our plan is to launch that initiative after PABC and the 3PK are proven effective by the operational research project that we're about to describe in a moment. The mission of the foundation is to manage a system for recruiting, selecting, training, and funding the ab initio training of our future global professional pilot workforce based on continuously updated 3PK training criteria and testing. You're probably familiar with the annual forecasts for the new pilots that are needed by the industry that are produced each year by Boeing and Airbus. In this case, I'd like you to concentrate on the year 2013, in which we see the forecast by Boeing that we would require roughly 25,000 pilots. One of the things that we almost never see is because it hasn't been credibly produced is the number of new pilots that we're actually producing. Because in 2011, the study I mentioned by APWDF, they were unable to come up with a firm number, a confident number of new pilots produced. And that leaves us with a situation in which we know that we're not producing enough, but we don't know how much we're short. We also know that because of this inconsistencies in the training standards that are being used by the national authorities, that we have a quality issue. And the majority of this remaining presentation will focus on that quality element. We'll come back to quantity at the very end. In 2014, the FAA funded a study to evaluate PABC's concept for developing a stakeholder-defined ATP-level professional knowledge training criteria cluster. In other words, an industry set of standards. This research was done by the Center of Aviation Safety Research at St. Louis University. They were also assessing the test that would be associated with assuring that pilots had actually acquired the knowledge and competence in the various subject areas defined by those criteria. Now, to be specific, we're looking at pilots who hold commercial pilot and instrument rating licenses, and we're focusing on the way in which their training has been found to be less than adequate because it is focused on single pilot operations rather than crew. It's flight mostly in single-engine propeller-driven aircraft with basic flying skills in a non-commercial environment with simple systems and most of the flight, virtually all of it, being done below 10,000 feet. Now that standard hasn't really been respected for a long time, and the industry has created its own what they call bridge courses to introduce the pilots to the high-altitude aerodynamics, meteorology, and other conditions aircraft and jet aircraft systems, which are more complex, in that environment, along with the importance of operating as part of a multi-crew condition, whether it's cabin, cockpit, or ground, and of course, obviously, air traffic control. But those courses are proprietary and they're widely varied in their content and scope and quality from one provider to another, in spite of the fact that there are some ICAO as well as national authority requirements, but they're a mixed bag. PABC's goal has been to create an ab initio and bridge consolidated set of criteria that could be used basically as the foundation for the training of pilots seeking entry into the profession, and therefore it would cover all of the knowledge and competencies associated from pre-flight to post-flight. The research project that was offered by the FAA did not provide funding or time sufficient for us to be able to accomplish that. We instead scaled back the scope of the initiative, the research project, to cover the flight condition from a high altitude cruise, such as 30 to 45,000 feet in a jet, through the descent and through the approach to the decision height or missed approach point in the approach. And it was referred to in our documentation and in subsequent slides that we'll see as the limited 3PK, not a course, but course criteria and testing. So the funding that was generated by the FAA enabled us to do this research using the limited 3PK, and it was found that the overall concept, the criteria or standards, and the test were validated as credible and effective. The test also confirmed that, as ICAO had found, there are serious gaps in the knowledge that a pilot who holds only a CPL and IR license possesses. So indeed, they are deficient when they enter new hire training, and it's very challenging for them to keep up. Asian insurers viewed this 3PK concept in 2013, and they proposed that the examination be used in the form of a test train concept, with the exam being used as a gap analysis tool. They said test the pilots after they're hired, so there's evidence that the airline is attracted to that individual. They've thought he or she was good enough to be part of their workforce. And then fill any gaps that are found by the examination through remedial training, targeted training on those particular topics. And that led to what we now call test train. Insurers then said, we'd actually be willing to share the cost of that testing and the remedial training with other industry stakeholders to prove the value of 3PK testing, and also to prove the cost benefit to air carriers and trainers of having better trained pilots entering new hire training. They also saw a benefit directly for themselves as insurers, because it would enable them to assess the level of risk that they take on as they assume each policy, which are good pieces of business sense. So we're proposing a 6-step operational research project be conducted by PABC based on the use of the test train concept. Using the limited 3PK test that was generated by the FAA research project, we would test roughly another 300 pilots to increase the evidence that's available on the kind of gaps and the extent of the gaps in pilots' knowledge. And we'd be doing this across 5 or so participating airlines. If we find that indeed it confirms the information we received in the FAA study, we would move on to step 2, in which we would use that same exam again with another several airlines in order to see whether or not targeted remedial training made a difference in the performance of those candidates. But not all pilots who are at the participating airlines would receive the remedial training, and that enables us to compare the difference in the performance and the effectiveness of the remediation as we go forward. And it gives us an opportunity to build a business case for having enhanced preparatory training. We would also be using vetted trainers to design and deliver the remediation. This kind of training is not the core business of an airline. So by having specially trained or qualified trainers that are conducting other ab initio courses, conducting this particular portion of the program gives us an opportunity to make sure that the quality and scope of the remediation is in fact up to standard. We believe that this remediation would probably cover approximately 6 days' time and therefore be minimally disruptive to a new hire training program schedule. We're looking at probably testing about 600 pilots as a result of this process at 6 or more airlines. Now, based on that second step evaluation and the results, we believe that it will justify the development of the full 3PK exam and criteria, of course, and that examination and the standards can be ready by the end of 2018. During the preparation of that set of criteria and tests, we would continue conducting the use of the limited 3PK in a test train mode for further data and refinement of the overall test and administration process. Then in 2019, we would have step 4, where we use the full exam in a test train mode, once again with not all pilots being trained, so that we can get the estimated benefit for the full spectrum, and we believe that it will be just that much greater. We don't know how long the remediation would take if a pilot was not particularly well prepared, but we estimate it probably would be completed within 30 days, although that's yet to be proven. Then in 2020, on step 5, all participating pilots in the participating airlines involved would receive remediation, and therefore we'd be operating the test train concept in its, you might say, full operational mode. By the end of 2020, we would have tested over 4,000 pilots, and each of these steps is based, that each of the steps we've listed is based on the fact that the previous step justified the step we're in now. So there's a dependency, if you will, on this as to prove the need for the next step. In 2021 and 22, we believe that we are basically operating the examination with an expanded participation, and that there will be a steadily reducing need for remediation as trainers around the world begin to recognize the value of having this, and therefore they're providing better trained pilots for the industry than they had in the past. Along with that, we expect a gradual increase in the acceptance of the test as an alternative means of compliance by national authority regulators. So the pictures that we've seen of the 6 steps are shown here, five of the 6. And this is the order in which the testing and so forth has been done, where the pilots are hired and then tested and then given remediation. But as time goes by, we fully expect that beyond the original research project group, the operators will want to have the test used before the pilots are hired as a screening process and a management tool. So the 3PK becomes an industry best practice, a preferred credential, and industry is then using it in order to assure that they have scheduled their program to accommodate the various kinds of gaps that pilots may have brought with them into this. The national authorities, again, we believe will be expanding their acceptance of this examination as an alternative means for their tests that support licensing at the ATP level. This program is designed to provide a pool of generically trained pilots who have been brought up to the industry's expected level of knowledge and competence through the curriculum that are provided by the various trainers. Now, they're not restricted. This is not a single curriculum and a single training program. This is what the various vendors believe is the most effective way for them to convey this material and bring the pilots up to speed. The pilots then enter what amounts to a pool, having passed this 3PK exam, and can be hired by any airline or business operator anywhere in the world. The findings and features that have been identified through the FAA research project show that the industry supports the various key elements that are the components that make up this process for generating the standards and exam. And the test itself is found to contain all of the features that one would want in a high-stakes examination process to assure knowledge as well as competence. All 7 of the stakeholders receive benefits, and this is just a tiny cross-section of the number of benefits that are available through this system. But it's important to note that by itself, the 3PK cannot solve the growing global pilot shortage. We are capable of testing 25,000 pilots or more, but self-funding eliminates many of the suitable and highly motivated candidates who are out there from consideration of this career field because it's simply too expensive. They don't have the resources. Aptitude, attitude, academic preparation, an individual's character, and so forth, those are the vital features that it takes to bring a person of quality, character, and interest into this industry. Their candidate's financial status actually has no bearing on it. But unless we solve this funding issue, the supply of suitable candidates will fail to meet the projected demand that Boeing and Airbus forecast, and that will seriously harm the industry. I've got a list here of several things that we believe will fall out if we're unable to solve the shortage. So I'll just let you read that at your leisure. Back to the Boeing chart we saw earlier, I'd like to bring your attention once again to 2013 and the fact that the quantity issue remains unsolved, but first we must have a quality system in place before we push hard on increasing the quantity, because without quality, the quantity is meaningless. So in 2013, we estimated 25,000 pilots per year. Training providers from around the industry indicated they felt the cost of the course for such training would run approximately $100,000 per pilot. So the cost of that training as a loan to those candidates to pay for it would run $2.5 billion. But that cost could be paid for based upon adding to the price of a ticket for an airline passage of $1. And that's because in 2013, the Airport Council International found that there were 3 billion passengers who were carried. And the simple math in that process, asking each of those passengers to pay $1 additional for the cost of their airfare, would amount to a $3 billion fund, which means that 83 cents would be used to create the loan funding, and another 16 cents would be used to pay for what we might call the overhead or back office cost of operating the foundation that oversees this funding process. The foundation features and functions are shown here, in which they recruit pilots using international network of recruiting systems and industry experts, etc. We use the same kind of mechanism for screening and selecting pilots, for accrediting those training programs to assure that they really are delivering the content and scope and competencies that we expect. They would also issue the payment to the training organizations and subsequently to the trainers themselves, and a whole series of other activities that are all relevant to a system designed to support this global process for acquiring, training, and funding the future workforce. You can read those at your discretion, but we believe you'll find them to be a legitimate and appropriate scope of activities for this kind of endeavor. The benefits that the industry will see are enormous. We've listed here some of the key elements, and they eliminate, if you will, references to very specific stakeholders. These typically are ones that apply to multiple stakeholders in the aviation industry. We believe this deserves serious attention and, quite frankly, industry support, because it represents an opportunity for our industry to thrive and grow and support not only industry development and aviation safety, but also the growth of global economies around the world. This is the PABC and the 3PK, as well as the Foundation. It's what we do and why we think they're important to you and to your fellow members of the industry. Each element supports the next, and each is dependent upon the proof and evidence that the previous activity and function was done properly, well, and deserves the follow-on support of its successor element. Ladies and gentlemen, we are asking for your help in building stakeholder support for this operational research project. The 6-step development plan, as we said, is one step justifying the next, so there's no great risk at any phase. If there is no justification, we stop right there. We recommend that the funding be done through matching funds. In other words, each of the stakeholders we're asking, the employers, educators, insurers, and manufacturers, no one's money is at risk until all the money is on the table. Long-term funding process, no one is put at risk or holding the bill, if you will, because we're funding the entire operation by the use of this $1, essentially, user fee that pays not only for the loans given to the ab initio pilots, which will then be repaid, but also for PABC's operation and the operation of the 3PK testing, standard setting, and testing process. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much for your time and attention and look forward to working with you through this process. Thank you and have a good day.